Welcome to the Bear Hug Experience, where we cozy up to the fire in our digital den and immerse ourselves in the inspiration born from exploring the hidden narratives and inevitable plot twists that shape every compelling startup journey. Join us as we showcase inspirational guests from bold investors with the Midas touch to pioneering entrepreneurs at the helm of today's most thrilling startups. We'll also hear from courageous go-to-market leaders navigating the frontier of emerging tech and the unsung heroes bringing all the people and parts together to form unstoppable dream teams. Here's your host, Kraig Ward, founder and managing director of Bear Hug Recruiting. Get ready for an insightful journey.
The following is a conversation with Samantha Burns, a distinguished marketing leader with over 15 years of experience in the construction industry, and currently the head of marketing at TraceAir, a leading construction technology platform that specializes in providing rapid and precise 3D data to home builders and land developers, aiming to revolutionize residential construction workflows and processes. Her current focus is on driving growth, educating the market, and enhancing engagement for TraceAir's core audience. In addition to shaping the narrative of construction marketing and empowering others to thrive in this ever-evolving landscape, she is dedicated to establishing the company as the foremost technology operating system for home builders, empowering them to operate with more speed, accuracy, and efficiency. Welcome to the Bear Hug Experience. And now, dear friends, fellow entrepreneurs, investors, and startup enthusiasts, here is Samantha Burns. All right, Samantha, thanks so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate you doing this.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, how you feeling coming into this today?
I mean, a little frazzled, and we're in the middle of winter break for school, and the kids are at home, so it's been a little chaotic, but also kind of nice because it's a nice little break from, for marketing anyway. It's a bit of a slower time at work. We're not doing a ton right now campaign wise, just because most people take this time off. So it's a nice little moment of downtime.
Yeah, I know you made the comment that it's like the Super Bowl when you have kids to try to manage. The summer schedule is one thing, but the Christmas break is a whole nother thing. So for all you parents out there, I have kids, Samantha has kids. We are in the thick of it, but we're making it happen, right?
Yeah. We're in deep this week.
All right. Well, you want to do I was telling you I wanted to pretend like we're in this like bear den, over like sitting in front of a fire, and you're like, no, let's do a ski lodge. And I'm like, okay, we'll do a ski lodge.
Maybe it's because I wish I were at a ski lodge.
I know.
This week, but...
Well, let's imagine that we just hit the slopes, our legs are tired, and we're taking a break, and you and I are just revisiting each other. We know each other fairly well, but this is another chance for us to dive deep and go into things that I've never gone into with you before, and I'm excited to learn more about you and share, sort of offer this platform as a way for people to dig in and understand your philosophy and what your mission is and all that type of thing. So why don't we start with what are you up to these days? What is this mission that you're on, and why does it matter to the world?
I'm currently the head of marketing at TraceAir, which is a leading platform for delivering fast, accurate 3D data to home builders and land developers. As a company, we're focused on radically improving the residential construction, workflows and processes. And in my role personally, I'm focused on growth, market education, and engagement in our core audience.
That was a mouthful, which is awesome. Like, that was so succinct. And yet, I know people are gonna be like, okay, break that down. We'll get there.
Yeah.
That was awesome. So, all right. So we're doing my version of what I know about this company, and to kind of reflect it back to you, and you can fill any gaps just at a high level here. So at a high level, what we're doing is we are flying drones over construction sites. We're taking images, we're stitching them together, and then we're doing some sort of photogrammetry. Is that what it's called?
Right.
To sort of stitch together, and it can provide like really meaningful, actionable decision-making abilities for efficiency for people on the ground. Is that a way
right?
to
I mean, I don't.
accurate?
Yeah, I'm not sure how like in depth you want to get here on, how
Yeah,
photogrammetry works, but
yeah,
I think the reason why we don't like to mention drones so much is that people sort of just say, oh, okay, drones, pretty
right.
pictures, great, got it. My nephew's got one of
Uh,
those. He can fly his drone
totally,
around.
totally. Oh, it's like a
And
real estate
so it's
flyover. Yeah.
right. And so it's completely different when you're incorporating photogrammetry into what you're doing because you have these ground control points that are making your images 3D. It's essentially a point cloud. So you have all these three-dimensional points. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to measure the movement of dirt on your project sites accurately within, survey level accuracy within, about 3 centimeters, and it allows you to really see exactly what's happening on your site. And the way our software works is yes, we do use drones to capture this data, but really drones are just a means to an end. The value of TraceAir is really in the software. And so once we get these images with the data, our data team processes it overnight, and then we're able to visualize it in the software as soon as the next day. So you're in your software, you can say, okay, exactly how much dirt was moved week to week. You can overlay your project documentation. You can say, oh, you know what, actually, the drawing says this manhole is supposed to be right here. And I can see that it's in the wrong place because the overlays are not matching up. And it allows you to really catch your mistakes early. It allows, projects to help stay on schedule. You can see are people doing what they're supposed to be doing on site, even without having to do a job walk. I think that's really one of the big value propositions for us is that a lot of the times, especially in the construction industry, we're dealing with a certain type of labor shortage where we just don't have enough project managers, project developers, things that people that can really stay on top of many projects at once, and they can't
Mm,
be at every project every day. So
wow.
this allows them to really do a lot of this virtually. And of course, you're still going to go on site, you're still going to do your job walks and everything, but this really allows you a level of precision and just, uh, really thoroughness that you can't get from driving through your site once every couple of weeks. This allows you to really dig into details and really even collaborate with your team, right? So you can pull this up with your team and go through things and things that are almost in real time, right? Most people do scans week to week, so you can really see what's happening that week and problem solve with a nice visual that everybody can collaborate in. So it's really great.
Wow, that actually filled in a gap for me, because I've done a lot of work with this company and with you, and that brought it together for me in a way that was so important. And it's funny, I did the drone reference, right? You're like, let's
Uh-huh.
let's de-emphasize that and let's actually talk about like that's just a means to an end, but really the magic happens in the technology, the overnight processing, and this 3D component that lets people do this virtual synchronization around planning and seeing mistakes and preventing those things. So the importance of that, I think, is pretty self-evident and really, really magical, I'm sure, to the customer. So your specific role in this is head of marketing, right? So we'll get into all that, but I'm curious, as the marketing leader at this company, I know you've built teams. I know you've done a ton of amazing things to help them with their incredible growth over the last few years. What have you identified as sort of this unique character traits or trait that you've developed, like in terms of a superpower? What makes you so perfectly attuned and suited to do this particular role, in this particular company? And how has that sort of shown up across your life in terms of a superpower? What have you identified?
The strength that I've really noticed, particularly in this role that I hadn't really noticed in my career before, was as like I often act as a translator, and not
Mm,
in like the literal sense. It's not like I speak a lot of languages or anything like that. But really, I'm a good communicate, like almost like cultural translator, or even like an industry translator. So what we have in TraceAir, we're an international company. We have people from all over the world, and I'm from this like loosey goosey, touchy feely, California. I went to UC Santa Cruz. We communicate a lot differently than say somebody from Eastern Europe who maybe communicates very directly. And so a lot of the times, we've had, challenges or certain people communicate differently. And so I'm often trying to explain to our founders or, people from overseas, like how the American, a US focused business behaves, how they communicate, how they function. And then, I do understand the more, European direct, sort of different style of leadership and communication. And so I often find myself trying to translate it the other way for the US audience. And then similarly in my role, I've noticed, like if you really boil down what I'm doing, I'm taking technology, which, you talk about like drones and all these things, they're very techy, photogrammetry, it's very complicated. And it's not something that the average construction professional is really thinking about all the time. And so having to boil down the essence of technology into what it means for them and sort of translating, hey, we're going to fly these drones, we're going to capture this data. Now here's what it actually means for you. What is it? How is it going to improve your workflows? Like that kind of translation, I think is really the strength that I've, been working on and developing, especially in this role.
And so this is really interesting. If you think back to, I guess it's really like a strength of communication, right? And an ability to boil the complex down to the simple. And that's at least my take on what you just said. Do you see that strength having been a developmental process prior to this company, or do you feel like that just really came and became apparent when you were introduced to this particular environment?
I mean, it must have always been developing, right? In my previous roles, I worked for general contractors most of my career, and in a lot of those roles, even though the title was always in, something about marketing or marketing adjacent, what I was really doing was a lot more sales enablement, and really taking construction teams and preparing them, and then preparing a proposal for our company to be selected as the next contractor for some major project, right? So that could be a new arena or a new skyscraper or new museum, a university building, whatever it was, right? So here's why our team is the best. Here's why we're the right contractor to build it. Here's the approach we're going to do. This is why we know your project the best. And a lot of the time you have these you're communicating with an owner, with a customer who is not always very construction savvy. It really sort of depends, right? So you have some developers that are very, very construction savvy. They know the ins and outs of construction because they're constantly developing projects all the time. And then you have these other types of clients, like, for example, if you're building an arena, these owners, these sports teams owners, they're probably only building one or two in their entire career, probably only just one, right? So they don't know a lot about construction. And so we have to take these really complex concepts of like the challenges of their job and communicate why we're the best contractor to overcome them and, complete their job on time and on budget with, a level of quality and certainty that they need, right? They're investing billions of their own dollars. You need to be able to communicate these, high level things in a simple, concise and easy to understand way. And so, really, I guess I've been honing this skill the whole time. I just never really thought about it from that perspective.
The word translator, it seems to totally fit. It seems like that really is the superpower, because it's a communication piece. It's translating complex to simple. It's translating value. So that's really cool. I love that. When it comes to the flip side, so Kryptonite is how I like to refer to the flip side of a superpower. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, a strength to a fault, like you're an over translator. And what does that do to impact negatively in your world? It could be seen as a strength to a fault type thing, or it could just be the things that you find in your day to day, whether it's probably translatable across work and personal. What are the things that you find just really suck your energy and sap you and keep you from doing your best work? And the purpose of this question is really just to give people a more holistic human view of who you are, because I think it's so easy to paint people in this, everything's perfect and everything goes my way. But it's really like, no, we all have we all have our issues. We all have our things that we have to keep an eye on, our areas of weakness that we can shore up, right? So what do you see? What can we share about the kryptonite side of things that you have to keep an eye on?
So, something I've always struggled with is processes or tasks where I didn't understand the purpose or, sort of why. And
Mm,
um, so, or doing things just, for the tax completion, you know, I guess benefits, or I don't know. I guess some people probably get a lot of benefit of, going through a checklist and checking the box. And I'm not saying
mhm.
that processes don't exist for a reason. I'm glad they exist in hospitals, and I'm glad they exist in a lot of places where they're necessary to save
Yeah.
our lives and make sure that we're in compliance. And I'm so glad we have attorneys and do all of those things, right, to make sure that we're not, doing something that's going to harm us later. But like in school, if there was an assignment that I didn't see the value, or I thought it was, stupid, I just wouldn't do it, right? And who benefited from that? Like nobody, right? Like it only hurt me. But I really struggled with that. I could not. I just didn't want to do things just because somebody told me I had to do them if I didn't see a good value in it. And that was something, that's always a challenge in a big company. You have certain processes or steps, and I understand why they're there. And I have a probably better appreciation for them now that I'm working for a startup. But something that I found really refreshing in a startup is if there's no immediate value that we recognize, I mean, we're immediately scrapping it, right? Because we don't have the
Mm,
necessary resources or bandwidth to do that. We're small, we're scrappy, we have fewer people. We cannot focus our attention on things that don't matter, or don't matter in with some very easily identifiable uh, goal that we're going to achieve in either the short term or sort of near long term. And so it's been refreshing to cut out a lot of that stuff, because those sort of like very bureaucratical processes have always been frustrating to me. I've never done well with long federal proposals or things like that, where you're really just, it's a ton of forms, a ton of checklists. It's just not for me. I'm a big picture
yeah.
person.
Yeah. Well, in the startup culture too, there's probably a level of, it's like a survival route. Like the root of all of this is survival. Like we need to make it, right? And so,
Right.
it's probably a welcomed relief to the team and the founders and whoever when you say, "Why are we doing this? Let's question it." They're like, "Yeah, let's question it," right? Because if we can improve efficiency, or really understand, like, does it still need to be a part of this sequence of events to get this thing done? Like, cut it, right? So,
Yeah, and I
yeah.
want to be clear that actually they're usually the ones posing that question to me and making me think about that even harder. And so
Mm,
it's like it's really been completely refreshing and eye-opening to work with people who really really understand what it's like to trim the fat in a way that I've never been challenged to trim it before.
yeah.
So it's been a great learning process. I thought that I was a work smarter not harder, be lean kind of person. Now I'm a thousand times leaner in the way that I operate, than
Yeah.
I used to be.
Yeah. So why don't we shift to getting some more context for your sort of hero's journey or your origin story. I see you as a hero, so we can call it that. Let's give the audience here a sense of where you come from. So I'm going to do this in the same way I did it when we were together on the phone for the first time. You might not remember doing
Mhm.
this, but I'm going to have you tell me your entire life story in 5 minutes. So I want you to look at your clock and I want you to try to pack in as much stuff as you can to give our listeners a holistic view of where you come from, uh, anything and everything that you want to share. See what you can cram in 5 minutes, and then we'll kind of dissect it. But go ahead and look at your clock and let's see what happens.
Hopefully, I can be a little more concise, but we'll see. So I'm from San Jose, California, the heart of Silicon Valley, or the Santa Clara Valley, as I was born into. Um, so really born into this world of tech. I'm seventh generation Californian. My family's been there for over 200 years. But my parents always worked in technology. My mom's worked for Apple for almost 40 years. She's been on the admin team there for a long time. And, I got to see a lot of really interesting sides of technology, based on the various departments she worked in. A lot of my childhood, I'd go to work with her when school was closed, and I'd be, playing with Nerf guns outside Johnny Ive's office in the design studio. So
No
I've always
way.
had yeah, I mean, really, really interesting stuff. I mean, the things they were doing back then before the technology was even there, it's insane, what they were doing on the design side. So it was always really interesting to me. My dad always worked in, program management. His side was always a little less fun. Going to dad's work wasn't as fun, but my parents always worked in tech. By way of the way the world sort of unfolded, I graduated college in 2008, and I had been interning at a construction company, and they offered me a job. And I never thought that construction would be the career path for me. I never even thought about it. And at the time, none of my friends were graduating college with job offers. I mean, nobody could get a job. Most of my friends ended up going to grad school because they couldn't find a job. It was a really difficult time to be coming into the workforce. And here somebody was giving me a job opportunity that I was probably entirely unqualified for. And so I said, well, I should probably take it. So I found my way into construction, and I started doing construction materials analysis, which is probably a fancier way of saying that I would drive around to gravel pits and ready mix concrete plants and hot mix asphalt plants, and I would just start asking questions. And I was doing market research for my company to determine whether or not they wanted to invest or acquire another company, or greenfield a new site, and really understanding what the geographic market was. And so that was really interesting. And then the economy, still wasn't getting better, and so acquisitions really weren't the focus at the time. So I ended up working on a project which was all about what to do with underperforming or non-performing assets. At the time, the company owned a lot of land that wasn't going to be developed for mining purposes. So I was with a small team, and we were uncovering whether or not we should explore alternative energy on those sites. So solar, wind, whatever. And so in doing so, I got into doing proposals. So I was managing our alternative energy proposals at the time. And that's where I really got into this more sales enablement type role of positioning the company and the team for why we should be the ones to take on the project. At the time, I was living in Santa Cruz, where I went to school, and my personal growth and more personal life led me to want to move to San Francisco. So I worked, moved up to the city, worked around a few places in various roles. Worked on some of the environmental stuff for the high-speed rail, which was really interesting. And then found my way to another contractor in a proposal, marketing focused role. And that's where I was for about 7 years. And that's really where I honed this construction, marketing, sales enablement, winning new work kind of growth role. And right as the pandemic hit, I got a call from Kraig Ward asking me about a role. I remember it very specifically, Kraig. There was Mayor London Breed was on the background of the news talking about, I think it was day one of the shutdown. And we were all, working from home for this first day. And they're talking about how we're all going to go into lockdown for 2 weeks. And honestly, Kraig, I hardly remember the what we talked about because I was so focused on what was happening on the news in the background. I was so distracted. But you were calling me about a role at TraceAir, and I was looking at the time. I was interested in moving on to a new opportunity, getting into doing something different. My previous role was very demanding with travel, with the hours, and I had small kids. I had my first child then, and it was beginning to weigh on me. And so I thought, let's take a leap into technology and construction tech, which I've always, been interested in. I've always loved the impact that construction tech has had on these, workflows that really haven't changed much in the last few decades. And I saw a really incredible opportunity there. And so I took a leap, right as a lot of people were getting laid off or there was no construction work going on. I took a leap into technology, and I'm so glad I did. So thank you for the opportunity. That 5 minutes, how'd I do?
I think that's great. One thing that I wanted to have you fill the gap in on is what were you thinking in college about what you would end up doing? It wasn't construction. What did you study and
No,
what were your sights set on?
you know, college was tough for me, and this is not tough academically. I did fine, but it was tough in terms of I never knew. I was not one of those kids who knows what they want to do when they grow up, right? Like I always, I saw my dad travel a lot for work, and he, he was traveling to Japan and flying business class, and I always thought that lifestyle seemed so luxurious and amazing. And I thought, okay, well, I definitely want to do something in business, right? Like businessy. Like I just didn't know necessarily what that meant. I didn't necessarily have a lot of interest in the quantitative academic fields. So I really wasn't going to spend a lot of time on mathematics or, engineering or things. So that was kind of out. And I've always been a more, verbal communications oriented person. So I somehow settled into linguistics and language studies, which was really like, I remember thinking at one point I had a brief interest in geology, which obviously is a science thing, and I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll major in geology. And my dad said, well, is it going to get you out of there in 4 years? And I said, no, it'd probably be another year. He's like, well, just so you know, I'm only paying for 4. So I said, okay,
Oh my gosh.
geology's out. But that is actually how I ended up taking this internship at a construction company. So I was studying English, really focusing on English linguistics and syntax, which, it's a really interesting field. You're really studying how the English language is structured and built. And interestingly enough, a lot of people who really thrive in this field of linguistics end up going into computer programming because it's sort of similar. You're sort of like you're writing code for a language versus, or you can translate that into writing code for technology. I didn't go that route, obviously, but it is sort of interesting. But I had been folding jeans at the Gap, working retail, making like $7 an hour. And my dad came and said, you need to find an internship, something that's going to get you a job later. And this was kind of during my brief geology moment. And I said, oh, well, there's these companies around, there's Granite Rock, there's Granite Construction. I was like, maybe I'll kind of learn something about mining and rocks and all that. So I searched around for, see if they had any job openings. And there was an opening for an intern in the corporate development department at Granite Construction. And I applied for it, and I met with the leader of the department at the time, who was she was a really interesting visionary, female leader in construction. She was really inspiring, and she offered me the job, I think, on the spot, and I started in this, very interesting role where, this team is working on mergers and acquisitions and things that were just so above my head. I didn't understand, any of this. And I was just, helping out on the administrative side, but I got to learn a lot, and it was an amazing opportunity. So I started that job when I was 19, and it was the summer after my sophomore year. And, I had, started making obviously a lot more money than $7 an hour. I think I was up to, $15 an hour, so making the big bucks in college. And once I started working, and I worked full time that summer and then decided to stay on part time through the rest of my college career. I still had 2 more years left to finish. I was in my mind, I was kind of over school. Once I got a taste of work, I was like, this is where I want to be. And so throughout college, I took the 8 a.m. classes so that I could go to work right afterward and get in another, 4 or 6 hours of work as many days as I could. Or I, crammed my classes together the best I could to maximize the amount of time I could be at work. Because that, to me, like learning on the job and getting value in real life was to me the best teacher that there could be. So my academic record isn't necessarily something I really always focus on, because once I started work, for me, that was my school.
Okay, so I'm seeing a pattern that I'm linking together in my mind as I'm hearing you tell your story. So I'm imagining you being like a very young child and hanging out with mom outside, her work at Apple, and seeing what your dad's doing. And at some point, you developed this sort of attitude where, like, I don't know if I want to say it's a contrarian view necessarily. It might be that. Might be
No,
categorized.
totally. It's
categorized as
yeah,
that.
it's contrarian.
Well, I mean, I think to question why, it takes a certain confidence, and it takes a certain, like, what's the word I'm looking for? It takes a certain
Ballsiness.
what's the word I'm looking for? It's like an intolerance, maybe. Like there's a little bit of defiance in there at some point.
Oh yeah.
Like willingness to
Level,
challenge
sure.
authority, challenge the system. You got a taste of the work world, and it was like, okay, school's kind of boring now because that's just meant to kind of get me into this flow. But I mean, it's so interesting how you maybe accidentally kind of had these dots connect with your career, but how interesting with geology, and now you're like moving dirt around, right? In a way more efficiently with what you do today. But I'm curious to see if you can identify, just because I'm always curious to see how early you were able to identify it, or your parents were able to identify it, maybe where it came from. Is it nature? Is it nurture?
Yeah.
There's like a work ethic piece to this. There's like a certain challenging the status quo sort of attitude that seems to kind of come out.
My mom's always been a bit of a rebel in that regard. I mean, so I really want to dig deep. I did, K through 8 Catholic school, right? And my mom, both my parents were raised Catholic, being of, my dad being of Irish descent and my mom being of Mexican and Spanish and Irish descent. Of course, boils down to being Catholic, right? So, but my mom always taught us to question. She said, don't just take everything they're saying for face value. Always question, always ask the big questions, and challenge your teachers in that regard. So that definitely came from her. And I think this notion of, like, working smarter, being efficient. And my dad always said, he'll probably kill me if he listens to this, is he always said, he's like, look, you want to find the perfect balance of, making the money that you want to make to be able to live the lifestyle that you want, but without having to work so hard that you can't live the lifestyle that you want. It's always this, like, this is like this fine line of working hard but not too hard, right? Like, I don't know that my parents ever instilled to me that there's virtue in just hard work alone, working hard just for working hard's sake. Like, you have to have some kind of outcome or personal benefit from it. Like my mom does not still need to be working for Apple. She could have retired a long time ago. She didn't even necessarily need to work when I was younger, and she wasn't making a lot of money at the time. And with the cost of childcare, you know how it is. Like, she didn't have to, but for her, it was about her personal growth. That's her social outlet. That's what makes her feel like, like good about herself. Right. And so I always adopted that. Like, for me, work has always been my social outlet, and how a lot of ways, like, I feel good about myself. I'm not built for staying home with kids all day and just, domestic tasks. That's not for me. I always feel better in the workplace when I can accomplish something, right? And then on my dad's side, he's just very, like, he's like, well, I gotta provide for the family, gotta make sure, we live a nice life, and make sure you have the things that I didn't have growing up, like a fully paid for college education. Thank you to my parents for that. I'm incredibly grateful for everything they've given. And I know that they've made some sacrifices, right? But they also taught me this, nice balance of achieving the goals you want to achieve, but, you know, being able to like take a break and have fun and, you know, enjoy your life too. It's a really good work-life balance, I think.
As you started getting out in the, professional world, you obviously had these developing strengths that were coming online and this particular way of looking at the world and at how you could make an impact. Did you, like, looking back, were there significant accomplishments along the way that continued to give you that sort of confidence and momentum in terms of like, wow, I really had a unique ability to, complete that project, offer that analysis, complete, win that contract? Like, what were some of the key moments that you look back on and say, like, I've accomplished incredible things as a result of these strengths that I've developed?
Actually, almost the opposite. You know, through a lot of my career, I really suffered from imposter syndrome. You know, like I had this first job out of school thinking there's no way I would have been plucked from a pool of applicants. I just got lucky, right? You know, and I I remember being asked to work on a project, uh, and I just was. I remember thinking I'm unqualified to do this, and I think I said that to the person leading the project at the time, and he just looked at me so bewildered and was like, "No, you're not. Just figure it out. Like, just figure it out. Like, there's no like we don't have. I don't have time for this." And I'm really grateful for that leader. He was, you know, very important in my career growth in that way, and just being like, I don't have time for this bullshit. Just figure it out. And so I was gonna say, okay, well, I guess I'll go try and figure this out. And so that was kind of how I started my career, was just feeling like I didn't know what I was doing, and afraid that somebody was going to uncover that I'm just this imposter, right? And then as I later in my career, as I grew into this proposal, this winning new work, this work acquisition role in my last job, uh, I just got a lot more confident, and I got a lot more, I guess, knowledgeable. I mean, you know, with experience comes confidence, right? And so I think at one point I noticed that there were leaders in the room, vice presidents, you know, people, you know, the boss people, right? And they would start to actually, well, I don't know if they actually asked for my opinion, but at least they started listening to it for the first time. And I said, oh, okay, maybe they may have never asked, but you know, at some point people started to listen when I spoke up, and I've always been taught to speak up. I went to an all girls Catholic school that's very progressive. They said, speak up, speak up, speak up. You know, don't sit silently. There's a reason why your parents sent you to an all girls school, and it's to learn to have the confidence to speak up. And so I always spoke up. Whether or not it was listened to or it was even of value didn't matter, but like I did it, right? So finally people started to listen, and then there was actually a very distinct moment. I don't remember who he was talking to. It was actually with Steve Delorto, when we were still working together at the time. And he introduced me to somebody, and he said, she has helped us win billions and billions of dollars of new work. We probably, you know, we would not be in the position that we're in if it weren't for her and the work that she did on some of these pursuits. And that for me was a light bulb moment of, well, first of all right, well, show me the money, right? So like I'm helping, I'm like, okay, so if I'm so valuable, I need to make sure that my value is recognized. And I think that's where the contrarian and outspokenness, like finally, I think became a benefit or an asset, I guess, at that point. It was like, all right, I need to verbalize my value. I need to stand up for my value. I no longer feel like an imposter in this arena. And then of course I changed careers, moved into technology, where I started all over again with imposter syndrome. So like, you know, it's a cycle.
Well, that's so interesting as a transition point, because I remember working on the search, and, you know, the requirement was like, do we want to go find someone that's in technology that may not have the construction background and context, or do we want to focus on someone that has the construction experience so they, you know, they can walk in the shoes of the people on the ground and understand their pain points and be able to translate our technology to those users. And it was recruiting for the modernization world of, these older industries that, are just very important in our infrastructure process, but they're having tremendous innovation impact them. And it was interesting. I'm curious if you look back and consider if we put someone else in the role at TraceAir that came from, software world, do you think they could have figured it out as quickly if they didn't have that construction background? Or do you think that that was the right call? I mean, obviously it was the right call to bring you in with a construction background, but what are your thoughts on
maybe
the
it
alternate?
wasn't. No, I think that they would have figured out other things more quickly than me, right? So I had this huge learning curve of having to figure out digital marketing, right? I'd never done that. I didn't know how a lot of this worked in the lead funnel and these tracking codes and pixels and conversions and all these things. Like obviously they're not like that difficult of concepts, but really there's so much you can do in the world of digital marketing. And imagine this is in the midst of COVID where all I had was digital. There was no in person because everybody's, working from home and lockdown. And it just was a really weird time. So there really wasn't event marketing or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I had this big learning curve that I had to figure out. And that took me a while. And it took a lot of, me being really unsure of what to do. Do I focus my efforts on advertising? Do I focus my efforts on, webinars? Am I really just focusing on content here? Like, what am I doing? Right. Trying to figure all of that out. And so that was hard for me, to learn, and not to learn the concepts or learn how to do everything, but really figure out where to focus my efforts, especially as a team of one in the beginning. And then, but on the flip side, there may be somebody who came in from the tech side saying, oh, well, I know I can run circles around Google Ads and all these, platforms and everything, and I know exactly what to do. But they would have had probably a long time to really, it would have taken them a long time to understand the construction mindset and where they operate, or even how to communicate with them. Sometimes the right verbiage and the way to explain things. I think that without there being some other person in the organization with that inherent knowledge, the messaging probably would have really struggled. So, and at the time there was nobody else, right? So I was the construction expert. I didn't have a single other person in the company to even check me on that or be another authority. So I think in that way, it was a good call because there needed to be one person from construction. So whether that was on the CS side or from somebody, but at the time there wasn't. So
right, because these founders were physicists, right?
Oh
right.
yeah, and messaging for construction people, not their biggest strength, right? So there was definitely some challenges in that regard, and having to separate things that are very common in tech language but not going to resonate with a construction professional. There was a lot of internal discussions about that, how to position that. So yeah, I'm just trying to think back. There was only we had our developer team overseas and everything, and our JS team doing the processing, but it was only 5 of us in the US. I mean, I was the only, at the time, American on the team. Not for long, but it was interesting.
And you just said GIS, just to make sure people follow. So that's geographical information system. Yeah.
Geographic information systems. Yeah, oh my gosh, our team's amazing. They are processing these scans overnight, doing QC. I actually, when I was in Armenia with the team in October, and they taught me how to process a scan. So I have a lot of respect for what they do. It's they have to be on top of it with the quality. They can't slack because, if that data gets messed up, it can really, really have, disastrous consequences for our clients. So we love that. We love that team and what they do. They're amazing.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you to do your best to kind of recap. What are we at now in terms of tenure at TraceAir? Wait, 3.5 years?
3.5, almost 4 years. 4 years
Yeah,
in May, I guess. Three and a
yeah.
half years.
So you bring up an interesting point about joining at a time when the world had shut down and in-person stuff was not there. Like there was no meeting with clients on site necessarily. There was, especially
Mm-hmm.
for that few weeks or a few months there, no events, and you had to learn this digital marketing thing. So I'm not sure if you want to do this sort of chronologically, but I'm curious, looking back, what can you reflect to us about your biggest lessons learned at a high level, whether that's 3 things or 5 things or whatever it is? I'm curious, just over the course of the time you've been there, what are some of the most significant like takeaways that have improved your ability to progress in your understanding of marketing?
I think something that I did and paid off was I focused on content, because that's what I knew. That's what I could produce myself and feel really good about it. And I think that having quality content and not quantity
Hmm.
is critical, especially when it comes to construction and this audience. You need to deliver value to people, right? And so the content needs to be good. And when it came time to grow the team and have our first hire, um, I remember having this conversation with Dimitri. He said, "Why would you hire somebody for content when that's your strength? Why don't you hire somebody that would bolster your weak areas?" And I said, "Nope, I'll handle those other areas. But content is where we need to thrive." And I found somebody who, she really, really shines in this area, and it has paid off in dividends for us, right? So our content performs well. It resonates with our customers. It's just something that we really like. This is an area that we really focus on, especially as there is so much kind of crap coming out with AI and all these things that are out there. We're really doubling down on quality custom content,
Hmm.
and making sure that that we're still delivering good messaging and good value for our audience. So that's one thing that I'm glad I did. Um, the other thing that actually surprised me, and I guess this falls under content, I thought like 2 months into 2 months into COVID, we were all like fatigued on webinars. And there's no, people are never going to want to sit for another webinar again. Like they got to be so webinared out by this point. Not true. Webinars are also consistently one of our best uh, performing, campaigns that we do is in webinars. And so again, it's just really coming from a place of market education and and problem solving and solutions, and not focusing on selling and talking about just the product, but talking about problem solving. That has been, hugely successful for us. So focusing around what we can do to help our customers has been great. Sorry, I forget the purpose of this question. Is what paid off, right? Or
Yeah, it's kind of like what experiments did you run, and you kind of answered it in terms of saying
hmm
what surprised you and what bets did you take that paid off. Yeah, you've essentially answered
hmm
what I was hoping for.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of any like major bets, other major bets. Oh, once trade shows came back, we came in not super hot on trade shows, but we went big, and I think that in a lot of ways they paid off, not necessarily just in you know customer acquisition, but in terms of the brand awareness and getting in front of people. in a way that we couldn't do. Not all of our audience is super active on LinkedIn, and there's a lot that with a small company and a small budget and a very, very niche audience, right? So we're not just focusing on the entire home building segment. We're focusing on the land development portion of that entire home builder segment. So I'm not trying to reach, the guys designing the houses. I'm not trying to reach, the guys buying all the latest smart home tech, that you can put in any new build house now. I'm trying to focus on the land development guys. And it's a very, very difficult audience to target digitally, right? So I can spend and waste thousands and thousands of dollars, and I did, right? Running some tests and some experiment on digital advertising. I can spend a lot of money doing that, and we had an advisor that really put it into great perspective, and he said, why would you go fishing in the entire ocean when you know that like your audience is just in the Mediterranean Sea or whatever, he's
Right.
like, just go where your audience is. Like, it's like sort of like duh. But when you're trying to be creative and find new ways to reach your audience, especially when you're only doing things digitally, you can easily fall trap to this, oh well, if you just spend more, if you do this, if you do that, you can achieve your goal. And it's like, that's not the path for us. And thankfully we didn't waste too much money, but we had to run some experiments. We had to run some tests to learn that approach wasn't the one for us, right? So that's something that I had to learn too, is really, really being lean with how you spend your money.
Can we talk about going to market? Because this series is called Going to Market in the Age of AI. And it's not necessarily about AI. It's the fact that AI is just impacting our lives in ways that we're still trying to all comprehend. AI is being integrated into products left and right. And, who knows what the long-term value, it'll pan out. There's so much money going into it. But when you think about going to market in the age of AI, right? And specifically you as the head of marketing for TraceAir, and you think about, like we talked before, about there's a separate sort of go-to-market team, and you, if I understand correctly, you see it as more supporting that team in their efforts. Can you define going to market and then talk me through a little bit about your interfacing with the go-to-market team, and just give us sort of a window into, I think the personas are interesting to kind of define. I'd love to learn more about what you've learned in terms of really like the targeting of those people and really getting in front of them. It sounds like the webinars are a really key piece and good content. I'm assuming just putting that in the right spots so they can come across it and understand the value for solutions they're trying to solve for. But talk to me just at a high level about your definition of go-to-market and your interfacing with those teams.
Well, I came in at a really interesting time with TraceAir because the company had just started to pivot. So originally the software and the platform was geared more toward grading contractors because of this, incredible capabilities that our team had built around efficiency in dirt movement and grading. So, I mean, coming in, you're like, wow, look at all these amazing things that it can do. Why wouldn't a grading contractor want to buy this? And many grading contractors do. We actually have several grading contractor customers, and even some early investors from grading companies. But prior to my arrival, the team had said, you know what, it's tough. This was a go-to-market strategy that failed. Grading contractors aren't as easy to sell to for various reasons as home builders. We're gaining traction within this home builder segment, and it's for a few reasons, right? So I don't need to get into a ton of details, but essentially the way the home builder construction market works is that normally in like commercial construction, you have owner, whoever owns the project, developer, you have a general contractor, and then the general contractor has various trade contractors like grading and other subs, right? So, but in home building, it's different. The home builder is the owner and developer right? But they're also acting as their own sort of construction manager. So there isn't a general contractor, at least during the land development process, there is no middleman there. They're managing it themselves. So our software, despite all of its amazing grading capabilities and tools, well, they weren't even really using, the home builders aren't necessarily focused on any of those things. They're really focused on other applications, right? So we had decided to make this pivot. And at the time, again, this was written, everything was managed by scientists and tech people. So we had a lot of language that I found, I think it was on our website somewhere, that we're like AI, AI powered, amazing grading tool kind of thing. And I remember coming in and being like, oh no, no. We gotta strip out. I don't want to know AI. Like you say whatever you want to the investors. Okay. You dazzle them with all your AI crap, right? But like nobody in construction wants to hear about this right now. Like it's too soon. Like even if there is AI, like we don't understand, like we as an industry are not there yet. Like just slow your roll kind of thing. So we definitely had to change the go to market. I think if looking back, if I were to do some things differently, our founders and leaders were a little like not hesitant, but they were kind of like, well, we think the home builders is where we're going, but it was like kind of like, but we don't want to alienate the grading guys. So it was a little bit of like a soft pivot. And I think going back, if I were to do it differently, I would have pushed for a much harder launch and a more like aggressive pivot with how we marketed ourselves and how we, came on the scene. I just would have done everything a little more aggressively. But again, I was brand new. I was an imposter. So many reasons why we didn't do that. But that's probably what I would have done differently. So for me, what go to market was really deciding to double down on that particular ideal customer profile, that ICP, that home builder segment, saying, okay, this is where we have product market fit. And I think maybe at that time we weren't 100% sure that we had the product market fit. But a year later, once we had our sales team in place, and once we really started experiencing that level of growth, I think that's when we said, okay, like we've got it. Like our go-to-market, we succeeded in this go-to-market strategy.
Yeah. Can you talk me through your relationship with sales and anything that you've learned there that could benefit people listening as you've been here for a few years and seen this pivot become more of a thing and then scaling in that home builder segment? What have you learned about working with sales and measuring things and being accountable to supporting one another? Because I think that's a big conflict in companies, right? It's this friction between the two departments.
Oh, so the whole classic rift between sales and marketing was something that I didn't know anything about. I had never worked with a, designated sales team before, because in construction, you're seller doer. So you have an operations team that is also your sales team. And so really, I always had to partner as a marketing professional. Like I was partnered with my sales team because I was their, person who was going to help them prepare to sell. And, especially in that like real sales enablement type position. So for me, I always thought of sales and marketing as a partnership. So I didn't know about these, classic battles that you get between the two departments, especially when it comes to tech. So once our sales team started to develop, we hired when you brought on Will, our head of sales, who, I see as my greatest partner and ally at TraceAir. We are, constantly in lockstep, and I talk with him almost every day about, what we're doing, making sure we're on the right page. And then something that really, I think, helped that the relationship between marketing and sales was that for us, we're a niche kind of technology, and we're working with a very sort of small list of companies. And we're really only talking about like 100 possible logos here. And so because of that, we're mostly doing account-based marketing. And so when we're only focusing on smaller accounts, we're really able to partner with our sales team and say, okay, now what can marketing be doing to help grow these accounts? So we see ourselves as a team, or sort of these little account-based mini teams, with our customer success, with our sales development, and sort of championed by our account executives, saying, okay, what can we be doing as I hate this word, but cross-functional team to really help grow these accounts. So I just don't see this like, oh, marketing only gives us crappy leads, and they're doing this or that. Like, we look to our sales team and say, what content do you need? What's going to help you with this account? And so we get so much valuable information from them. What are you guys hearing? What objections are you getting on your calls or in your meetings? And what could we do to help you overcome those objections?
It sounds like in a traditional sort of technology sales and marketing friction setting, that doesn't really exist here, because you guys are so focused on, how do you define it? It's like the top 100 home builders. Is that the way that
right?
you frame
Exactly.
it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
exactly.
So it very much does sound like it's a partnership in a similar way, where you were doing more sales enablement in construction to help the construction company win those bids, right?
Right.
So you're not
right,
trying
exactly.
you're not doing like traditional demand generation where you're just, I'm sure the sales development team is doing all sorts of funny things to drum up, interest in these accounts. But it's not so much of a marketing's doing these trickery, hacks to try to drive a bunch of marketing qualified leads into the sales pipeline, and then sales being like, these leads suck. It's like,
right, exactly. Like, without getting into a lot of detail, so we don't have those tensions. Don't get me wrong, there are plenty of other tensions interdepartmentally at our
right.
company, but something that we do a little bit differently is, so marketing isn't like, yes, we are responsible for generating leads, of course, and of course we are um, putting MQLs into the funnel, right? But we also we have still a very aggressive outbound strategy in our sales development department, and the way that they operate. And so there's a lot more sort of happening between, like, on the sales side, sort of independently from what's happening in marketing, which my biggest challenge is really sort of closing that gap, so that our outbound efforts are not spray and pray or random, but really working with really focused on getting the right people at the right time when they're engaged. And so that's really been a challenge, but we're solving it. We're getting there.
What are some of the kind of key identified results that are, make it worth paying for, and hopefully many times over? Can you talk me through some of the results customers get?
Sure. So there are a lot of different ways that our customers can recognize, ROI, and so I'll walk through a few of them. So I think that one of the bigger challenges, and I'll try not to get too construction-y to, I don't want to lose people here, but I think something that happens in construction, especially when it comes to grading contracts, you're saying, here's the job, and the grading contractor says, great, here's how much it's going to cost. Here's my bid. And so you, as the owner, are saying, okay, I'm going to take the lowest bidder, or whoever, and you say, you agree, and what's a lump sum contract. So you're saying, I'm going to pay you this entire thing. I don't care you do care how long it takes, but it's like, you just get me what I need. You get this project to grade in whatever way you need to get there. And if you handle the dirt twice, that's on you. If you make mistakes and have to fix it, that's on you, because I agreed I'm only paying you for the total job, right? Something that happens almost inevitably is there are design changes. once there is a change on that job, you open yourself up as the owner to change orders. So now your contractor can say, oh, well, this wasn't in the original scope. I'm going to issue a change order, and now you have to pay me for that. Now it's your job as the owner to verify that that change order is legitimate, or was, that you should pay it, right? So in order to be able to fact check your work, or fact check, those billings that come in, you need really, really accurate tools to be able to measure exactly what happened and where and when, as it compares to your design. And so TraceAir enables our customers to do that. And it's not about like shorting contractors. It's about just making sure that everything is accurate. So we've had several of our customers say, wow, my contractor hit me with like a $50,000 change order, and I was able to go in and take some measurements and prove that actually that's not how much dirt they moved, or XYZ didn't actually happen, and so I was able to deny that change order and save myself $50,000, right? So that's one way that the owner has benefited. Another type of use case is maybe you have a project where you're talking about like the massive home developments, right? Where sometimes they're, several hundred acres. And you say, okay, well, we know how much dirt there is on the job-ish, right? We know what the grading plan needs to look like. We can say, okay, we have, I don't know, call it 100,000 yards of cubic yards of dirt on this project, that we have too much of it. Now we need to either pay to off haul it, which depending on where you are geographically can be very, very expensive. And I mean, this could be the tune of, several $100,000, right? To dispose of this dirt somewhere. Or now that we have TraceAir as a tool, we can be a lot more creative with where that dirt can go. Can we, raise the pads a little bit? Can we, and pads are, the sort of flat areas where the homes are built, or can we, find some other alternative sort of solution for this? And by knowing what your dirt is doing on your project early and often, you can be a lot more proactive with how you manage that, to avoid having to pay to either import or export dirt, which can be, again, like I said, hundreds of thousands or sometimes even millions of dollars on a project. So that's another way. And I know that's a little bit maybe complex for this podcast. But in another scenario, and maybe the one that's probably the simplest to understand, is what our software allows people to do, and is it gives them this very powerful visibility into their projects that they've never had before. And with this visibility comes this empowerment to be proactive against things that could become very, very expensive down the road. By identifying a problem early, you are able to solve it a lot more cheaply than you would if you waited later, right? So by using the example that I used before, you notice that there is a manhole or a utility box or something not in the right place, and you notice that early, it's going to be less expensive for you to fix it before everything is done, right? And so it's really hard to quantify this, right? When you're talking about ROI, it's incredibly hard to quantify how much money you save on mistakes that you don't make. But something that once we sit down with our ideal customers and we're walking them through and we're showing them the demo of the software, they see the value right away. That's not the issue for us. Like, that is not a challenge to get people to understand how this can really, really help them in their day-to-day workflows. And so that's, the value is very easy to see there. And then one more thing that is just an easier one to quantify is something that we do for our customers, is that we empower them with data that they normally would have to rely on somebody else for. So prior to using TraceAir, what would happen is these builders would be relying on their contractors for data. So, how big, or an engineer or a surveyor or consultant, right? So how big is this stockpile? Like you're going to pay somebody a couple $1,000 to come out and measure it and tell you how much dirt is in the stockpile. Well, now with TraceAir, you can just couple of clicks, boom, done. You save yourself $2,000 and you have the answer that you need within seconds so that you can now decide, okay, here's what I need to do. Do I have a place for that dirt? Do I need to off haul it? Whatever it may be, right? So like little empowerment things like that have saved our customers a lot of money in what they spend on consultants, and just relying on other people for information, and it allows them to just make decisions more quickly.
Well, it sounds to me like you're selling magic. Like, I mean, what I'm sure the users on the ground who don't really care about AI, they're like, it might even be a turnoff, like you were kind of alluding to earlier. They're just trying to get shit done and not make mistakes and, do things on budget.
Right, exactly.
Like the logistical effort that is required to deliver the solution, I'm sure that it baffles people's minds, and internally too at the team, right?
Yeah.
But speaking of magic, I want to talk about the team, right? Because I know this team very well, right? There's been a lot of work that we've all been able to do together to put this team together. If you kind of reflect back on the last 3.5 or 4 years, and you see these people coming in, these department head leaders that we brought together, and then to see this pivot to home builders, and then just this focused attack on, penetrating that market and getting those customers to be acquired. What do you think is what makes it work? Because I'm sure that there's a lot of function and dysfunction in any team, but like, what's your view on just what's made this whole thing be so successful?
I think that at the core, as much as using the scientific method and being so academic about everything sometimes just drives me nuts. But I think that at the core, so our founders are academics, right? Maria has her PhD in physics, and so that academic approach to understanding the problems and construction has been, to me, the reason why this company has succeeded. And while they are not construction professionals in understanding always like the way that construction people think and how they communicate and how they talk and all of that, something that I will say is that when it comes to the land development, the grading process, and these home builder processes and the way that construction works, our founders are some of the truest experts in this. Maybe even like they could go toe to toe with any grading contractor or land developer about this particular area of construction. Maria specifically, I can say she is a true expert on dirt, on how dirt moves and movement of dirt, and the tools that she's led this team in creating are truly unmatched, and you couldn't do that without a significant area of expertise. So something people say is like, oh, you guys have been around 8 years, why am I only just hearing about you? It's like, well, this team probably spent 5 years in deep, active research mode. I mean, constantly developing and improving these tools and really getting it. I mean, our team was truly embedded. Our founders were embedded with a major grading contractor for years, understanding how their projects operate and all of their processes and the challenges that they face. I mean, they would drive, probably 45 minutes, jump on a plane with a project team, fly down to Southern California, and just day in, day out, learn how land development works. And that level of that deep level of product research and understanding is how we've gotten here. We wouldn't have been here if our team was only trying to do this at the surface. No pun intended.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that makes sense. So it sounds like what really makes it work is at like the deepest level of commitment and curiosity to solving the problem of a very specific, user or group of people that are, so it sounds like it's a mixture of deep curiosity, like technical expertise and passion for improving or accelerating the lives of a particular group of people that are building things. Is that a fair way to summarize that?
Yeah, totally. Exactly.
And so so as we're talking about the leaders, right? So it sounds like without that, it wouldn't work, but that's what, no matter what dysfunction might occur in an organization between departments, priorities shifting and changing, pivoting, whatever it is, it sounds like it's the ability for everybody to ultimately get behind that level of passion and commitment of the founders that makes it all stick together, no matter what kind of occurs.
Mm-hmm.
So Samantha, can we talk about, what an average week, like busy week, looks like how you kind of break down the different sort of things? I know it's going to shift and change at different times in the year. I think your business is very seasonal, right? So I'm sure in the sort of winter time, things slow down, right? It just shifts in terms of what everyone's doing in terms of construction.
So during the winter is when construction is a lot slower, but it also means that the people we're trying to get in front of are a little bit less busy. So it's actually a great time for us in marketing to really be active and find time to go. Maybe we do an in-person event with a customer, or we're able to get people to sit down in some webinars because they're not, running around putting out fires on their projects left and right like they are in the summertime.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So how does that break down into, just an average week as the head of marketing for TraceAir? Just give us a high level on that, what that might look like.
Sure. So, in an average week, we are, focusing on, okay, of course, there's the, sort of the short-term sprint. What do we need what's going out this week, right? Do we have any webinars this week? Is there an internal meeting that we're coordinating with a customer? Or are we prepping for a trade show, right? So we're sort of focusing on any sort of immediate needs. We kick off the week 6:30 every morning. I've got a call with our design team. Our designers are located in Armenia, so between marketing and design, there's always a lot of coordination, right? Because we need our creatives and deliverables that we might need that week. So that's how we start our week. We figure out what we need to, at a bare minimum, to get through the week, right? Then we usually have some other planning sessions or meetings around what content are we planning for the upcoming weeks or months, what other initiatives might we be working on. So for example, we're going through some kind of branding strategy at the moment, so there might be some things associated with that. And then, we usually have various, what we call our ABM strategy meetings. So account-based marketing strategy. So these are when we have these cross-departmental meetings between sales, marketing, and customer success, really focused on one account executive's area, whether their territory and their priority sort of named accounts. So we have several meetings associated with that, and we're developing those strategies and executing on those. And yeah, and if it's a really exciting week, maybe there's an in-person event, maybe there's a trade show. And so if that's the case, then, all hell breaks loose. Nothing else gets done because we're, hey, we're still a startup and we're still scrappy. So my team, we are getting our hands dirty and putting together our trade show booths as much as the folks at Freeman will allow us to do it without charging us a fine. But, so we're still scrappy like that. So, every week is different.
As a leader of the company, right, you're having to set certain targets for yourself, create this agenda and these plans for putting out the content, supporting the sales efforts and things like that. What have you learned about the process of planning around team expansion tied to different strategic goals that you've set? Any lessons or takeaways for how you've grown your team?
That's been a tough one because, we have always been the smallest team at TraceAir. And I think that a lot of maybe experts and advisors and companies would look at that and say, like, that's absurd. How have you only had, this many marketing people for this long? And, like you should have more. There's a lot, like, you guys should be bigger. And uh, so growing the team has been like sort of an internal challenge for me, sort of making the case for to grow us. But I think now we're at a really good point. So as I mentioned earlier, my first hire was somebody focused on content, and that's primarily what she works on now, and she's doing a fantastic job. And after that, it was like, okay, trade shows came back. We're really focused on webinars, and we have all kinds of, we're trying to do more in-person events with prospects and customers in geographic locations. We call them road shows. We want to come to them. And so we really saw a need for somebody to take ownership of our event marketing because, I think as a lot of people in any industry know that when you're doing trade shows or events, that takes up all of your time. Like, you're not getting anything else done because there are just so many little things to manage. And so that for me was the next logical person to bring on, the next logical role. And having that has taken a huge weight off of our shoulders and allowed us to do everything else, right? To focus on all the other facets of marketing, and allowed our events to run so much more smoothly, so much more organized. And we just have 1,000 times better results. And then really, as we've kicked off this more holistic ABM strategy the last year or two, we really found a need for somebody to kind of be the architect of those campaigns. Whereas I have, somebody creating content, and, she can pump out amazing content really quickly. I have somebody who's doing an amazing job at organizing the events and managing the logistics, but really having a person who is all about our growth and managing those campaigns. And so whether it's pulling the levers on the, our ad campaigns, or focusing on, certain email drip campaign, whatever that campaign might be, right? Somebody who's really a good architect and strategist around that. That has been a truly, truly amazing position to finally have filled. And the one that I struggled to hire, I think, the most. That was a very tough position for me to hire. I think getting aligned among between the founders and myself on what truly that role can and should be. We weren't always seeing eye to eye, so we really we lagged in that hire probably too long, I think. But now we have an amazing person on board. He's fantastic, and we've seen just amazing results in the 6 short months that we've had this person with us. So shout out to my team. They are amazing at what they do, and they make it all happen.
So what are you learning about yourself as a leader? Have you had any epiphanies about management style, or how to leverage your strengths to keep everybody cohesively aligned?
I probably need to be more organized, because I got a little like, in my previous jobs, I had to, coordinate and manage, I had to manage up teams of, 20 people sometimes, and keep everybody on their toes. So it was a lot more organized, as I had to be. And then I was a team of 1, and I was like, okay, well, I don't need to document and be, super clear about all this communication, because I'm my only person on my team. I can just everything's in my own head. It's fine. And having to sort of like relearn my initial management organization has been like a little bit more challenging, right? And then having to do all of that virtually. So that's been an interesting change for me. But I think that, at the core of it, just especially when you're virtual, just having to, or, working remotely, you just have to communicate constantly. And so, we do. And so I speak with each of my team members pretty much every day. And we just have to stay on it that way. Otherwise, like, otherwise we, sort of get lost. And then the other thing that I've always said that I appreciate when leaders do this, so I try and do it myself, which is like hire really competent, capable people and just like get out of their way. Like let them do what they do best. And so, we're not a big enough team to like, there is no, we don't really have a ton of micromanaging at, I won't say there is none, but we don't have a lot of micromanaging at TraceAir because we don't have the workforce and bandwidth to do that. If you're micromanaging, then you're wasting your time because either that person isn't the right person in the role, or you are focused on the wrong thing because there's probably 10 other things that need to be done versus you nitpicking every little thing. So in that regard, that's my philosophy, is I try and just let my team do what they do best.
So aside from waking up every morning to, do a job and get a paycheck, what if you dig deep, what really is the deeper motivation for being a part of this? Like, how do you identify and kind of pull on that thread every day?
I've seen, so many processes in construction, or I've seen the construction industry suffer a little bit from, I don't want to say lack of innovation, because I think that is wrong. The construction industry is incredibly innovative when it comes to constructability and how to build and all of these things. But there are certain pain points that we've just learned to live with, and like we don't have to live in pain anymore when there is a fairly simple technological solution. Like I'm trying to think of a good. It's like, why would you continue to still keep a book of maps in your car when there is when you can have a live GPS, map on your phone telling you how to get places? Like, it's faster, it's easier, it's more accurate. It allows you to be nimble in case there's a traffic change. Like, it allows you to operate more safely. There's a million other reasons why we should adopt technology in so many ways. Yet for some reason, the construction industry has been slower to adapt to certain technologies. So the more that I can do to help the industry solve their personal day-to-day pain points is, to me, it's valuable, it's noble, it helps me wake up in the morning and be happy about my job every day.
Well, because it seems like this strength that you've been able to utilize and evolve over time is this translator strength, right? And so it sounds like applying it to an industry that you know so well, that you studied in school, that you interned with, studied in school to an extent, right? And bringing all these things together where you knew you wanted to be sort of in on the business side, with your dad's influence, and growing up in Silicon Valley with technology all around you and the innovation happening, and it sounds like you're able to really bring all those things together in a way that is really meaningful to bring that technology to create these efficiencies in this construction space, and the pain points of solving those customer problems really does it for you. So let's transition to sort of starting to wind down here. Can we talk about what you're most excited about and some of your top strategic priorities over the next 12 to 18 months, and give our listeners ability to maybe even see ways that they could participate in supporting you?
So now that I have a bigger team, and I have, people that I don't need to, handhold really executing on our marketing strategy on the day-to-day campaigns and events and content, something that I'm really focused on in the next year in 2024 is really all about our sort of our branding strategy in general, our positioning. As our product continues to evolve, we have some questions that we're asking internally of, how can we best position ourselves to be this number one platform for home builders as we continue to grow? So really working on some strategy there, which I'm excited about. And then I'm focused on just a lot of corporate marketing initiatives, updating our website and some things like that that have not really been given a lot of attention. And then another area is really trying to improve our sort of thought leadership positioning. We have some incredible experts in the field. I mentioned one of our co-founders, Maria Koklova, who is truly, truly an expert in land development and dirt balance and grading and developing this technology. And so as a marketer, I really want to position her and position TraceAir as really the authority in this area in solving a lot of these really, real pain points for our customers. So really focusing on our media strategy and participating in a lot more speaking engagements and maybe more industry events and things like that we've been sort of too busy to focus on in the last year or two. But I think we just have a lot more bandwidth and ability to kind of play the long game and focus on our long-term publicity strategy in a way that we haven't really had the ability to do previously.
Well, that speaks to all the hard work and traction and structure, team building that has enabled you to get there. I see it. I'm not sure if you see it because you're so in the weeds, but that's amazing. Congratulations to getting to a point where you can actually focus on those things. It's an exciting milestone to be able to free yourself up to think about messaging and branding and positioning and helping position the founder for more of that expertise that otherwise would just kind of go by the wayside. It wouldn't really be acknowledged, in a broader sense.
It's always important to take a step back and make sure that we're looking at things from a higher level perspective, because otherwise you can get lost, and I definitely don't want us to be lost in our own, day-to-day kind of tasks.
Tell me about what you believe the world needs to understand or embrace that will make the world a better place in the coming years.
How we still have climate change deniers is beyond me. and how I think fundamentally, not like getting super political here, but I think fundamentally, at least in the United States, we have given corporations a lot of power and we've trusted them to self-govern and said, well, they're probably not going to do anything that's bad for us, right? And it's like, well, no. Time and time again, they have proven that they will poison our rivers and they will make us sick and they will make us addicted to opioids, or they will do things that are harmful to us. And so I think that we need to, as a society, not trust that our leaders in government and our leaders in corporations are always going to put people first, because I think time and time again they've proven that profits come over people, and we need to, as a society, refocus our energies to put people above profit. I mean, as a person in business, I don't know how I could ever get to that point where what Kool-Aid do you have to drink to say, you know what, I'm going to make all these people sick, or I'm going to do this horrible thing to damage the environment. And of course, there are so many great companies. There's so many companies that are ethical, but I think that we are in a dangerous position in the United States that we've let a lot of companies, who are probably paying off our, government leaders and stuff. We've let them get away with too much too long. And so for me, ethical business, maybe if we're packaging this in a different way, we can say we need to focus on business ethics in general. whether that's environmental, whether that's like with how they treat their customers, how they treat their workers, how they source product. Like business ethics to me are one of the biggest challenges we're facing as a society, because I've seen just too many horrible things happen where people are not ethical. Companies are not ethical.
Thank you for that. That's very meaningful to me personally as well. I want to ask you to talk for a moment about, if you look forward 5 years and you pull out your crystal ball, whether it's for business or personal, or even better would be to do a stream of consciousness for both. What do you hope happens? What are you looking forward to? Like 5 years from now, what do you hope for?
Oh, From a business perspective, 5 years is a long time for TraceAir. And I think that in 5 years, I hope and I truly believe that it will be the premier, the leading, the number one technology, operating system essentially for home builders, and not just on the land development side, but in various other workflows, whether that's in vertical construction, or land acquisition, and so many things. I think that there are so many stones that we have not unturned yet, and we know what those stones are. We want to go overturn them, but we don't. We have to pick and choose, right, what we do first. And so 5 years gives our product team and our sales team a lot of time to continue that growth and really, help home builders do what they do best. So business wise, that's what I'm looking forward to. Crystal ball, 5 years for me personally, I would love, 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 love one day to have a vacation home cottage retreat somewhere, maybe in Italy, maybe in France, maybe somewhere that I can just go relax and, spend a couple weeks there a year and recharge and, experience a different culture at least a few weeks out of the year.
Well, I mean, surviving the pandemic, having kids, being in a startup, that all points to
need a break.
That points to needing a break. No, that's great, and yeah, I wish for both that business future outcome as well as your personal vision there. What's something that's happened to you, Samantha, in your career or life that few people will believe?
So actually, when I was working, I was evaluating a site for a company. And so I was driving around to a lot of remote places in the US. Once I was in Alaska, another time I was out in the Eastern Sierras, like really kind of in the middle of nowhere, and looking at these particular pieces of land. And so I drove out there, and I remember very specifically once I had a coworker with me, and we pull up, and there was like a really sketchy looking trailer on the site, and it just like you just got this like really kind of sketchy vibe. And the guy was local to the area, and he said, "Oh, back up now, back up now, back up now." And like he's like, I think we just stumbled on a meth lab. He's like, just get out of there as fast as you can, because you just sometimes you get these like very abandoned kind of places. It was just a little sketch, so we drove out. So I didn't like actively uncover anything illegal going on, but that's something that he said he was pretty sure was going on. So that was kind of weird. Trying to think of anything else that happened to me in life. I don't know. My life's pretty believable. Okay.
Any hiring mistake or horror story that you've heard about or seen, and what do you think could have been done differently?
Earlier in my time at TraceAir, we were interviewing for a particular marketing position, and we'd interviewed a candidate who was a little like, he seemed a little odd, like a little eccentric, in kind of a like, well, maybe he's kind of a strange, like you're kind of like a data nerd kind of guy, maybe a little like socially awkward. But maybe that's, maybe that's the kind of thing that we're missing in our marketing team. We have, everyone in our team currently is very like social butterfly kind of, really great at talking to people kind of thing. I was like, maybe we need this like kind of data focused, not necessarily the most conversational person you've ever met. But then later, when we came time for a second interview, he in the first one, he appeared like, very professionally and everything. And then in the second one, it was like he, I don't want to sound like mean, but he was a little very disheveled. He had like taken out a like mouthpiece maybe that held some teeth. He seemed like he was not like sitting upright, like he was like sort of just like relaxed on a couch. It was very unprofessional and strange.
I take that to mean that he did not go to a third interview.
There was no third interview, no.
Okay, if you told me you hired him, I would have had to say why. Okay. The lesson there is what? What is the lesson?
Multiple interviews, especially virtually. I think it's so hard to hire people without meeting them in person. And now I've done this several times. It's so weird. Like I've met like, you know what I mean? My entire team, I've never met in person until after they worked for me for a couple months. So it's just so strange. Because construction is a people industry. I don't know how I've done this whole 2-hour interview without mentioning that at all, not once. But like, it's a person industry. You have to. It's all about relationships, and so you have to build a relationship. And so for me, the hiring virtually still is just I'll never truly really understand it or get it. But so far so good. I'm very pleased with the team I've hired, so it worked out.
And what about on the flip side? Any really amazing hiring success story that you've heard about or seen? And what do you think the secret sauce was to making it successful?
Oh, well, I think in terms of success story in general, overall, we've, with your help, obviously, the leadership team at TraceAir is amazing. Having our head of sales and our head of customer success. Like I think that the sales team, particularly as we've built, I think Will Johnson, our head of sales, he's really tapped his network in a way that I've never even seen before, of just like him having this like really deep bench of people to pull, and maybe one or two people that haven't performed great or haven't worked out, but by and large, the vast majority have been just outstanding. So that's been really amazing to watch the way that he can hire and build a team so quickly and efficiently and effectively. It's just amazing.
That's great. What advice would you give to someone who wants to switch into technology? I mean, you did it. Anything looking back that you could share to make that process easier for someone else that might want to, whether it's construction tech or maybe just getting into tech in general?
I think that for me, I didn't understand what path I had to take. I think you and I talked about that a lot, Kraig. Like me trying to figure out, like I knew I wanted to go into tech, but I didn't really know how to do it. And it was like, okay, well, do I continue doing marketing in like a big, like kind of super established construction tech company? Do I just, do I take my strength in content and go do content within this big organization? Or, and I think the startup thing just didn't quite like that. So I thought I might have to go that more traditional sort of staying on the big company route. The startup thing didn't really cross my mind until I got a call from you. And I thought like, oh, well, I don't know. Like, could I do this? There's a lot I don't know. There's a lot I don't know, but something I've learned in my time here, and is that there are so many former construction professionals who have founded startups, and they are solving so many amazing issues, and they are looking for people who understand construction. That to them is a big deal, especially in hiring some of these key roles. And so I think that whether it's marketing or customer success or sales or whatever it is, trust your industry knowledge, trust what you know, trust that you know the problems and now this new solution, right, for the industry, and go sell it. Like that, you have the knowledge that you need. You'll figure the rest out later, you know. And so I guess my advice was that if I can take a leap in, you know, April of 2020, you can take a leap now, and construction will always be waiting for you if it doesn't work out.
All right. Well, let's talk about the qualities that you look for in the people that you want to have on your team. What can you tell us about that?
I always talk about scrappiness, especially as a startup, and even as we get bigger, maybe we don't need to be as scrappy. But for me, that is the quality I didn't know I needed until I came to a startup. And when I made that first hire, it was like, you know, I hired somebody who was just really resourceful and scrappy, and that to me was like, I was like, yes, that is what we need. That's something that I need somebody who's going to find a way to get it done, even if they don't have all the right tools, even if they don't have the most ideal working setup, you know, even if they don't have everything that they think that they need. Somebody who can work with a little to create something is a quality that it's really, really hard to teach. It's just something that you have to find when you're looking to hire somebody, I think.
How do you test for it?
It's a tough question. Yeah, I think when I ask, for me, when I talk to candidates and I'm you know, going through the interview process, I want to hear them tell stories, and so I'm asking for stories about, you know, what's, you know, I'm starting to point blank ask, what did you, can you tell me a time when you didn't have everything you needed, but you still managed to accomplish something or attempt to accomplish something? How do you go about doing that? Like, here's a problem that might exist. What would you do? How would you accomplish it? How would you solve it? And people that have the story, they don't, right? And it's not about like leading witness, but you kind of say, look, I'm looking for this. You know, you apply with your questions, and if they're scrappy, it comes up.
So I get this question a lot from hiring managers. They'll be like, how do you find the people, or how do you like find people with these particular character traits or with these particular abilities? And it's like, well, you go out and you look for people that, I mean, there's a strategy for it that's very straightforward to explain. But people are like, well, how do you make sure? And it's like, well, you ask them for stories and then you go back behind them and you validate it. It's like that simple.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
Mm-hmm.
make them prove
Mm-hmm.
it, have them do a demonstration of some sort. So anyway, I appreciate the simple fact of, yeah, tell stories to prove it and then somehow demonstrate it to me early and often. So I know I made a good decision, right?
Right. Like if you can give me really, like, you just ask for some really specific examples. And if people don't have a lot of specific examples, well, sometimes just because they're nervous and you got to like warm them up, and that's okay. But then, you know, like if you really dig into a casual conversation, like as we know, I'm a very casual person. So for me, the interview process is like, it's about like, I'm a totally like a gut person, right? So like
Mm.
I'm not always sitting like I do use my Kraig method of the rubric and scoring and stuff. I have better methodology now than I probably did earlier, but um for me it's about gut, it's about having that conversation and, you know, letting people feel comfortable and come through with their stories. That will tell you more than anything else, really. More than any resume will.
Yeah. Well, what if one of our listeners wanted to come work for you? How would they go about it? And what would be a really unique approach someone could take to really blow you away, make you want to hire them on the spot?
You know, we're always looking for the best talent, you know, on our bench. And so something that would, you know, really be great is, okay, so my LinkedIn is full of so many people trying to sell me services and things. So things will probably get lost in there. So please don't contact me on LinkedIn necessarily, but find me through our website, through traceair.net. And really what I want to hear is your stories. I want to hear a couple of stories about how you've impacted your business and what you've done in your career that would be beneficial to TraceAir and help us grow. Something that's unique, something that that isn't just something that's evident on your resume. Those kind of stories are, I think, what help people jump off the page.
Yeah, that's really good. Cool. So why don't we wrap up with some rapid fire questions? If you could go back and tell yourself one thing early in your career, what would you say?
I would advise myself to, I know I talked so much earlier about speaking up, but I would advise myself to listen more and pause before jumping in. And just be a little bit more thoughtful about how I enter the conversation versus just finding a way to enter the conversation.
But I'm going to argue with that for a second, because you didn't expect me to want to argue with that advice to yourself. But do you see more harm than good historically by having done that? The other way?
But it's like we all put our foot in our mouths every once in a while. So
I feel like some of that builds good character and shows the rough edges that give people an ability to go like, I like you, kind of scrappy. You're like, without that, you might not be as scrappy. Let me kind of parlay that into a sub question. So you've been sent back in a time machine to visit your 18-year-old self. Okay. You have 10 seconds to say 5 words. What are they?
I only need 4 words. Take a gap year.
Okay, translate that.
And I'll elaborate on that because I think, especially, I went to a very high achieving high school and come from a very high achieving place where everything was about what 4-year college did you go to? What did you, blah, 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 all these things, all this like achievement. But I feel in a lot of ways, I feel guilty about, it's not that I feel like my college education was wasted. Of course, I had a wonderful experience and I learned amazing things. And I went to a fairly reasonably priced university in California. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so like a lot of that time was wasted. I now knowing what I'm doing, I wish there were things I wished I could study now. And now it's like so annoying to have to go back to school and try and juggle it with my personal life and my career because I can't just like quit my job and go back to school. But there's a lot of like business fundamentals that I learned on the job, and I kind of wish I had a more academic approach to, but I didn't know that I wanted that at the time because I was 18 years old. And if I could go back and do it again, I would have studied something that was relevant to my work, but I wouldn't have known what I wanted to do in my work until I started working. And so like, I think that this like rush to put people into a 4-year university is like, it's not fair to put these decisions on these children when like they may not necessarily know what they want to do. And I wish I had known what I wanted to do when I started school. So anyway.
Cool. I want to ask if you have any advice for female leaders out there, whether they're working, like, let's say, for example, they're working under a male leader and they're wanting to work up into a leadership position, or maybe they're already a female leader wanting to work further up into the C-suite, or any just advice from what you've learned being a woman in, I think in the business world of predominantly there's just an abundance of men, right? And so any
construction? No,
not in construction, especially in construction, right?
I am like, of course, I am so grateful for the construction industry's efforts, especially in recent years, of elevating women in construction and elevating their visibility and putting them in leadership positions. And I've had so many amazing female mentors in my career. And so I love all those things that are happening. But also for me, like, I just don't, it doesn't need to be us versus them. I think that I wouldn't be where I am today if it weren't for my male mentors as well. And I view the men in my industry as my allies. They're not my opposers or, oppressors. I wouldn't be where I am if it weren't for the men also. So I think that the closer we can get to equality, the better. And then also, you're probably going to put this in, even though I wish you wouldn't, is don't take no shit. Like, I think that if you see, if people are not treating you equally, speak up. If you are getting paid 70 cents on the dollar, speak up, because I guarantee that if you ask for it, you're going to get it. Like when it comes to your pay and your value and your compensation. But that's something that I've seen time and time again in this industry is, I could really go down like a rabbit hole with this one, but what I would advise women looking to getting into leadership is to don't second guess themselves and don't. I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. Don't accept less than what your male counterparts are getting for doing the same or equal work. I guess never be afraid to walk away.
And do you have anything to say about imposter syndrome? Because it sounds like you've dealt with that a few times. Any lessons now that you've kind of gone through that cycle and looking ahead, knowing it'll probably hit you again? Any new ways of looking at that?
Imposter syndrome is not just for women. Other people have it too, and everybody in some way or another has had to fake it till they make it at one point, or has felt insecure at one point. And so you're not alone in that. And I think this is where a female mentor really does come in handy, is, having a network of people who can assure you that you are not an imposter, that you do deserve to be there. And hearing their stories and their experiences, I think is immensely helpful.
That's a really good point. Yeah, it's like a reality check. You're not insane, asking for what you want or what you deserve compared to your male counterpart, or reminders of people around you that have tracked your career, that have been able to be ahead of you in many ways and be able to lean on them for that strength when you need it. Could definitely shorten the cycle. So I always
something I tell my girlfriends is always have the confidence of a mediocre man going into your job interviews and meetings, because I think it is in a lot of ways really true, that men are often they're promoted or they're given opportunities based on their potential, and women have to prove themselves first, right? And so the way I see that is you've already proven yourself. You've already done it, so have the confidence of the next guy who hasn't even done half as much. So, I can't tell you, Kraig, how many times I've seen, I don't like using the word mediocre, but it's sort of true. Men doing kind of the bare minimum, who may or may not, have the best track record, get promoted to, leadership positions based on what potential they may or may not have. Whereas I've seen, women or, maybe people that don't necessarily fit a certain mold of, whatever the company's ideal is, work twice as hard and produce twice as many results, practically, begging for promotions or getting shot down for promotions. And it's just been incredibly frustrating in my career to see this. And so my advice to women is that if you're not, or to anybody really, not just women, if your employer or your leaders are not recognizing your value and compensating you for that value, do not be afraid to walk.
Yeah, I was going to say, is there anything else that can be done other than just a personal demonstration of speaking up, and or if it's not being listened to or appreciated, then go find some place where you can fit in better? Is that as much as we can really do from your perspective?
I think that, there's a lot you can do, right? you can start the revolution from within your organization, but you may experience backlash, right? And you might, it's really tough because everybody's circumstances are different, and we all need to put food on the table and a roof over our heads and feed our families. So there's only so much risk maybe some people are willing to take. So I'm cognizant of that before I say, start the revolution, fight back. People need to survive also. But I think that if you're not being valued, or you're not getting the recognition you deserve, you owe it to yourself to explore other opportunities. That's really all I'm getting at.
Yeah. If you've really truly tried to do your best to speak up. And I think that's hard. It's hard to know how much is enough. People tiptoeing around not wanting to offend others or take too much of a strong stand. Another thing I've been sad about recently is seeing a lot of these headlines talking about some of these big corporations that had a really big emphasis, not really because of COVID, might have just been other factors too, but a big emphasis on sort of like diversity and inclusion. They had people that actually held those titles in some of the large companies, in tech especially, that have recently been like disbanded. Like those departments have been disassembled. And the same thing is on another note. It seems like even with customer success, when budgets are tight, I read another study recently that customer success is often cut to. So it's so interesting when you talk about, profits over people earlier, and we look at when, certain things are really, really important, whether it's diversity initiatives or whether it's customer support departments, there's anyway, I just think there's so much that can be done. And I think, like you said, making sure what your value is, tracking your accomplishments, what you've produced that might otherwise go unnoticed, like in performance reviews, being able to speak up, share it, ask for what you want, hold a boundary, and then know what you're going to do if that boundary is not, maintained, in terms of owning your own self-worth and being able to go find a place that's going to appreciate you. So, yeah. Well, 2 last questions, to give our listeners just a little bit more into a 360-degree view of you. What are 2 or 3 non-obvious, more personal things about you that you're most passionate about outside of work, or any fun rituals that you have that make life more meaningful?
I really enjoy cooking. I love to, prepare like really nice meal, learn different types of cuisine, really, dig into it with like the best ingredients. I spent so much time, in college, like in the background in my dorm, the Food Network was like always on. So for me, like food and good wine and has always been an experience I really enjoy. Unfortunately, I don't go to a lot of restaurants anymore because I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and that experience is not enjoyable for anyone. Yeah, that's something I'm really into. And then also, travel. I like to get out of the country as much as I can and, experience a new place. I have friends that live in Europe, so we try and visit as much as possible. And I like to expose my children to different cultures outside of the U.S. as much as I can.
Any last final words for our listeners?
Just thank you for having this conversation with me. I really appreciated it. And I want to thank you once again for really, I don't know, I feel like in a lot of ways, I wouldn't necessarily have been an obvious choice for this position I'm in now. And you really forced me to like dig into my reasoning for why I might take the role and what I wanted out of my career. And I feel like what you did was make me do a full 360 assessment of myself before I could even evaluate another job or another career path. And so it helped me feel a lot more resolute and confident in my decisions. And so for that, I'm really grateful, and it taught me a lot. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate being able to use this platform as a way to share your story with a greater audience. And yeah, let's wrap it up with that. I'm so thankful for you coming on the show.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate it. That was fun.
All right.
And that's a wrap on this episode of the Bear Hug Experience. Thank you so much for joining us. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please give us a like, click, follow, or subscribe. We appreciate you taking a moment to give us a quick rating and a written review so we can continue to expand our reach and inspire the next generation of leaders to help make this world a better place. You can also contribute to the conversation around this specific episode by using the comments section at whatever platform you're on. And last but not least, if you have direct feedback, a question, or a guest you'd like to suggest that we have on the show, please shoot us an email at podcast@bearhugrecruiting.com or visit bearhugrecruiting.com/podcast. Thanks so much for listening, and we look forward to having you join us again on another episode of the Bear Hug Experience.
What?